maru maru no, te tua te whātui aputi. Ko tāni rahi mana turuhu Te Au, ko Ira ko Nan, ko toku whānau, to oku whānau. Tu maru maru no, te tua te whātui aputi. Ka titiro hau ki peka peka, ara mai rā te karere. Ko pōna turi, uia mai ki hangarea whānui. Te tiki tiki o hikurangi, uia mai ki paki paki. Te paki paki tanga hine te mo, uia mai ki hera tonga. Ta kotono. Ko te mihiro whare no te kuia mihiro. Ko te awa hauora, ko te wāhanga hauora. This is the place that Mihiro has given her name to, Mihiro whare. We belong to Te Awa Hauora, which is the river of health, and we also belong to Te Wanga Hauora, which is Māori health. Here, Pari used to also work with all of us too, and she was really literally in charge of Māori health. And my first boss that employed me is Rāpai Pōhea, and she was also the last manager before her death. And so everyone on this wall, be it our kuia, our kaumātuas, they're all part of this whānau te wāhanga order. And to them we owe a spiritual thanks for what they have left behind. Amen. Ko tānira he mana turuhu Te Au, tōku ingoa. Well, I'm from Paki, and I think that most of you will acknowledge that I've sung my tauparapara of who I am. Paki is a little settlement 5 miles from, about 8 miles from Hastings South, just off the Wellington Road, main road, State Highway 2. I live in a house that I've been there for now 41 years. It was my nanny's, and I'm the oldest of the family, and I was literally given the house for my lifetime. I brought up 8 children there. I have 5 girls and 3 boys. My oldest daughter is 52 now, and my baby is 41 next month. I married an alcoholic. I didn't know then that was what he was, and so for the first 2 decades, things weren't always great. But however, with perseverance, he actually became dry after 12 treatments. I have been to Arawata, I've been to Hamner Springs, I've been to the Bridge. They were the places that we went as whānau to support my husband. My husband's name was Kevin John James Te Au. He was from Ngaitahu, he was from Colic Bay, or Aparima is what it's called today. He was very fair, green eyes, a fine-looking man. As I say, we had 8 children. And life wasn't always great, but there were also good times as well. We've progressed so far now that my husband has now died. He died in 2000, mainly through illnesses that had affected him because of his drinking. Literally, he ran out of time. But when he became dry, he became a counsellor for alcoholics. He was on the National Advisory Committee to Parliament and that anything to do with A&D, he was there. He had clients at Lower Hutt Probation Service, as well as we had offices in the Hutt and Newtown, and also Porirua. We also had a residential for women in Island Bay, and then we moved to Karori. So his life was mainly down in Wellington once he became sober, and my life was back at Paki, and we became like pen pals. So it was quite good because he'd come up one weekend, and it was good to see him, and it was good to see him go back. So that was the existence until he, as I say, he ran Puangi Ho, which was an alcohol service for Māori, and he would take people off the street. He had the 2 hard baskets. And so eventually he said, how would you like me to come back to Hastings? And I went, gulp. Couldn't live with each other, couldn't live without each other either. So he moved back, and the last few years were very rewarding. He had a contract with the community probation, but his time ran out. And on the 26th of July 2000, my husband had been in hospital for a week, and he was unwell, and he had went in to have an op. And then they rang me up to say I needed to go back to the hospital, and when I arrived he was talking, he wanted to go to the toilet, this is my husband, and he did that. And then the doctors called me and said that he's got a growth behind his lungs, he had pneumonia, it was all over his body, and he was going to die today. That was the words that were said, and that did happen. My husband died about 11:15. Doctors were allowed to sign the death certificate before 11 o'clock. We had to run the undertakers because they were some friends, and they came and picked my husband up, and we took him to the undertakers, and we had him home at 2 o'clock back at our home, and then to our marae the next day. I think it is not about my health then, but it has been also about my health, because what went on with my husband is also similar things that affected me within his own health problems. And so today I'm a widow, my children have grown up. They admired my husband for his progressing to be a recovering alcoholic. And so it has been a lesson to them also, but that's not to say that kids do not smoke and do not drink and all the things that life throws there at them. I'm a mother of 8 children. I'm a grandmother of 29 grandchildren. I'm a great-grandmother of 21 great-grandchildren. This year, I'm nearing my 70th year. I've actually will have 2 70th birthdays because I got shouted last year and they thought, they gave me a birthday thinking that that was my real birthday, and it wasn't, it's this year. So there's things to look forward to as well this year. For myself, I've been actually very, very physically fit person. That I went to school at the Hastings Girls High School. I watched this big 4-storied building of our hospital grow. When I was at school in 1958, 59, 60, 61 at Hastings Girls High School, we sat on the football field watching this big building grow. And we said, we're going to have a skyscraper. Well, in those days it was quite unusual to see buildings that were so high. And so we watched it grow, and we watched it being open. And of course, not long after that, I had my first child. I'd just turned a week over 18. And so I had a daughter, no labour at 3:15. My mother was there to visit me. She went home at 25 past, I got my first pain, and at 22:04, within 15 minutes, I'd had my baby. My mother got in the door, they rang her up and said, your daughter's in the theatre. She said she can't be, she was asleep when I left her. And so I've been very, very lucky to have children so easily, in very, very short labours, from woe to bang. And they're there. And I've been very blessed because the kids have been really good. When you have a husband that you actually have to go out and work, do all the work and earn the money and that, it's quite hard. And so I did that, and my big children, my oldest daughter Corinne, she was the mother. She looked after the other brothers and the sisters, and for them they learnt some really good skills. They learnt to cook, they learnt to clean, and do all the things that parents most probably would do. And so eventually they all started to leave home, they got partners, and they had children as well. And so I was blessed to have all these lovely grandchildren. I used to be the babysitter for them every weekend. I'd have the children on the mattresses in the sitting room. And it was a real joy. And then all of a sudden, kids didn't start coming to my house. And I used to think, feel a bit empty now. I wonder what's happening. Of course, naturally, they're growing up, and Nanny wasn't the person that they wanted to stay with. They wanted to do other things. And so that was their progression into adulthood as well. And in some ways, that was allowing me also to do what I wanted to do. So I worked at Woolworths. I was a manager of the Taste of Nature section, which was all about the herbal things. And I did courses for Red Seal and also for Blackmore, so I was a consultant. I'd trained to do all the things and learnt all about herbal remedies and things like that. He said, we're going to have this health check. We're going to check everyone's health. And so the nurses came in and they took blood pressure and all those things that they would normally have, and they found out that I actually had diabetes, which I didn't really know about. I loved cordials, I loved all the sweet things. Being Māori, you eat lots of pork bone and puha and all the fatty foods, and so that was me. So I would say I was a diabetic from about most probably in the 80s to today. And I had a few doctors over that period of time to now, and many of them actually said to me, whatever you were doing, you must have been doing something good. For all that time you've been a diabetic, you haven't had any serious major problems with your diabetes. So when you find out, tell us what you did. Well, I never found out either, because I still carried on in some ways the way I always did and the way I ate and things like that. But it shook me up when my husband died, and so I thought, I've got all these kids to look after and all these grandchildren that depend on me, so I need to do something. And that's been a bit half-hearted as well, my response to diabetes, but I've become a bit better. The doctor I have now, I think he thinks it's doomsday for me, but he did say, we want to have you around till you're 80 to 90. So I thought, I've only got a few more years to do that. And so relatively, I still consider I'm very, very healthy. Two years ago, I had lots of pain, and I ended up in hospital for a week. And the diagnosis was that I had gallstones that were affecting me. So how do I get gallstones? You just eat butter. I used to pile the butter on my bread. You eat a lot of fats. I love the meat of fat, especially steak, and I'd eat everyone's piece of fat on their plate that they didn't eat. Pork, well, pork goes with pork bones. So I loved that. I loved boil up. And anything that was pretty fatty, I ate it. And so I realised in that 2 years that you couldn't always eat everything that you like to eat, because it would give you this terrible pain on the side of your stomach. So anyway, after the 2 years, they said, if you get sick, come back to ED. So I never got sick for 2 years. And then just recently, and about 6 weeks ago, I got another lot of pain. Not as bad as the first time, but it was still pain. So I presented myself to the doctor, and she said, I think your gallbladder's playing up again. I said, yes, most probably, because I know what I ate the other day. That same afternoon, one of my cousins died. And of course, I do the kaikaranga at the marae. So you were a bit sick that day, so you didn't go down, but the Sunday I went down, and the Monday was his funeral. I'm at the funeral and I get a text from my daughter, Mum, you've got to ring the doctor. So I went outside and I rang the doctor, and she said, "You're to present yourself at ED immediately. You're going into hospital." So that was just 3 weeks ago. So I ended up in hospital. "You're going into hospital." So I was admitted to the wards, and from there it was like, is it today or is it not? Each day they said I was going to go and have an operation, and it didn't happen. And so it was put off. I had to stay on for Easter, and my kids must have thought, how did they manage to tie our mother down? Because normally it's very hard to keep me at home or whatever. But anyway, because I had, they had said to me, if you didn't stay in the hospital, you get put at the bottom of the list. And I thought, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I was allowed to go out every day at home. So I had a couple of hours at home doing different bits and pieces. Drove myself home too. They didn't know my car was just parked over at ED as well. So went home, did things, came back, and each night I had to go on antibiotics, and right up into the operation. So Anzac was coming the next week, and you thought, oh, holy heck, I'm going to be in for another holiday. But anyway, on the Tuesday before Anzac, I was supposed to go to hospital, supposed to go to the operating theatre. On the Wednesday, they all prepped me to go say, you're going to have your op. And I went up about 11:30 that day, and I was back by about 1:15, something like that, back into the room. I'd woken up in the theatre. And so consequently, what had happened with the gallstones is that there was one evidently blocked in my bile duct or whatever. And they blew it with a laser. I don't know how they blew it. They put a telescope down my throat to have a look, and they had stuff that they put down to grab things. They couldn't get the gallstone out, so they blew it up. And then they couldn't get the stones out of the gallbladder, so they put a stent. Now, they've showed me pictures. I have got the pictures in my handbag. I can go and get them. They're horrible. They showed me pictures, and it's sort of like a little grey worm in my stomach. It looks about that big. I don't know how big it is. But anyway, that's supposed to drain the stones out. Health-wise, I just did the Kaumātua Iron Māori swimming. It was only 100 metres, but still. And I only did that because it's my daughter that runs Iron Māori, otherwise I most probably wouldn't have done it at all. But I've got a bike. I keep relatively very fit. Not too bad for a 70-year-old, I suppose. Yeah, and so that's my medical history. The last week that I was in, we had a young girl come in late at night, and she was in a lot of pain. And I didn't know till the next morning. The curtains were always drawn, and she had family coming in and I think they'd gone off and got her a few things and that. So because the curtain's sort of drawn, you feel like you can't switch over and have a yap to her. But in the morning, I made sure to ask her if she was all right. And she said yes, she was. She just had a very, very huge abscess, and it was evidently dealt with in the operating theatre. And she was all right. She was all right to me, I think, because I was Māori, and I think she felt a connection. But what I did notice, that she seemed to have had less care given to her, that nurses, whoever were looking after her, didn't come in as much as what I thought that they should be tending to her. And that may be just my own assumption of things, but I just felt that how many other people have the same problem, because certain nurses are different to other nurses, I noticed in the hospital. Some were really prim and proper, but they did a good job, and others were real hard case, but did a wonderful job also. And so the ones that are hard case actually were the good ones. They were really friendly and really good at their jobs, and the ones that a bit more quieter, they were good at their jobs too, but you didn't have that connection as good with them as what you did with the other ones. Well, no one but me can fix me. That's the way I see it. I get a lot of support from my children. In fact, I get quite hoha with them because they're quite bossy and tell me, Mum, you've got to go and do this and you've got to do that and so forth. And so at times I'm inclined to ignore them until the time comes when I have to go to hospital, and all of a sudden you're getting stubborn. You're saying to them, I'm all right, I don't need you fellas to take me to hospital. And they're saying, we're coming, Mum, we're coming now. Just be ready. And so you have to listen to them sometimes because they actually do care about you. But because I'm quite an independent person, it's actually really hard to hand the reins over to them because then they just boss you left, right and centre. And a lot of this is actually about my own independence. I'm 70 and I hear people keep on saying to me, we need to keep you well for the next 20 years. That seems a lifetime to me, to have 20 years added on to my life now. But at the same time, I know that all this caring and this growling at me is really keeping me safe and keeping me healthy, because they want their mother around and their nanny and their great nanny, and I'm Nana Ma, and plus I brought up a grandchild who is now 25, and I'm also bringing up a great grandchild who is 4.5 years, starts school in July, and she's actually in my care under SIPS. And so I'm still a mum, and I'm still a nan, and I'm still a nanny. And so it's actually really important that I look after myself, because after having a meeting last week with SIPS, they're desperate that I keep looking after baby, even though I told them I'm getting older. And so you have to look at that. And so this child I bring up, she's absolutely beautiful. She's got good manners, and I look after her well. And so she's a real joy, and she makes me want to live longer too. With the problems that I had with my husband, that I looked at it, my children only had me. And if I was to fall down, where would they be? Many times I thought, oh, this is not worth it. You know, why do I have to go to work? And, you know, it was about paying bills, keeping your power going, making sure we had food for 8 kids. When you did their lunches, you put all the bread, 1 bread, 2 bread, 3 bread, 4 bread, 5, up to 8 lots of bread. And then you'd put the filling in, and then you'd put the lid on and so forth. And so it was always what are we going to have? But they never ever starved, and they never ever missed school. Always got into the things that I actually found important in their lives. My kids played rugby. My kids were New Zealand karate champions, 2 of my boys. They could have gone to Australia. My doctor wanted to give them money to go, and that tour was called off. I've had kids played netball. I was the junior netball coordinator for Hastings, so I picked reps for the intermediate kids. The granddaughter that I brought up also, she did tap and jazz and marching, and so did some of my other girls march. And the little baby that I've got, she's done 1 term at gym. She wants to learn to swim, so she can't do that till she's 5. And she's actually a very, very strong kid, no trouble to do forward rolls, jump up on bars without any help and things like that. So it's quite rewarding to see that you can do what I do believe is that the activities, people must give their children activities. Otherwise you find that they go off the rack. Now I'm not saying my kids didn't go off the rack either, because some of them did. But what happens, they still come back into the fold because they knew that I was always at home, that they've got a home to come home to. So that's been the important focus of my life, that I'm the matriarch of my family and they need me. Te tua te whātui a puti.